see Led Zeppelin as a band that changed things.
When you think of Led Zeppelin, the mind immediately conjures visions of excess, towering amplifiers, sold-out arenas, and an unrelenting swagger that redefined what it meant to be a rock band. But behind the scenes, the real story of Led Zeppelin's success was built on something far less glamorous: grit, relentless experimentation, and a drive to challenge every conventional rule of the recording studio. At the heart of this creative maelstrom was Jimmy Page, a man whose obsession with sound bordered on the fanatical.
Because I was the producer of it, you see, I was in the studio at more times than the other members. And I was the one who tried sort of experimental mixes of this and that.
And at the heart of one of their most famous tracks, When the Levy Breaks, lies a story about vision, audacity, and a producer who walked out. To understand how Led Zeppelin reached this point, one must step back and consider the chaos that preceded it. By the time the band began work on their untitled fourth album, they were already legends in the making. Their previous records had broken ground, blending blues, hard rock, and folk into something that felt both timeless and otherworldly. And yet they were still a band on a journey, fine-tuning their sound with each release.
Just 40 minutes showtime. Led Zeppelin arrives here at Tampa Air Center at the Tampa International Airport.
Last night in Atlanta, that crowd was the biggest gathering ever in the history of Georgia, 49,000. And tonight in Tampa, the record set for the world. It's like the entire cities of Bradenton and Clearwater all got in their cars and went to Tampa Stadium.
Their first album, recorded in a whirlwind session, was raw and full of promise. Their second was a brash statement of intent. By the third, they had begun to experiment with texture and nuance. The fourth, that was the moment they aimed for immortality.
You wanted to do things that other people hadn't done. With the fourth album, to put it out with no information on it seemed exactly the right, logical thing to do.
When the Levy Breaks wasn't just another song in the recording sessions for that album, it was an encapsulation of everything Led Zeppelin was about. Originally a blues standard by Kansas Joe McCoy and Memphis Minnie, the track's humble origins were worlds away from the sonic monolith it would become.
If it keeps on raining, levee's going to break.
The band's version wasn't so much a cover as a complete reinvention. What began as a mournful ode to the Mississippi floods of the 1920s became a thunderous, apocalyptic masterpiece. And it all began with a drum beat. John Bonham's drumming on When the Levee Breaks has become the stuff of legend. But capturing it was no easy feat. Page, ever the perfectionist, decided to record Bonham's drums in the cavernous hallway of Headley Grange, a remote Hampshire mansion the band had commandeered for their recording sessions. The choice was inspired. The natural acoustics of the space lent Bonham's drumming a power and resonance that no traditional studio could match. Microphones were placed strategically to capture the ambient echo, creating a sound that was massive, primal, and utterly unique. The result was a drum beat that doesn't just drive the song, it dominates it.
This is the hall where the drums were set up and where Levy Breaks was recorded. The mics were put up here over the banisters here.
Andy Johns, the younger brother of renowned producer Glyn Johns, was on hand to engineer the session. Andy's meticulous approach and willingness to experiment made him the perfect foil for Page's ambitious vision. Together they pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the studio, layering sounds, manipulating tape speeds, and creating an atmosphere that was as heavy as the subject matter of the song itself.
I get asked a lot about the drum sound from When the Levee Breaks with Led Zeppelin, and I'm understandably a little proud of that one, because it was the first time that we'd ever done anything, well, I had done anything with just two mics on the drums. I had done a session that year with Blind Faith where I recorded the drums, the vocals, and the acoustic and lute, I think it was, and vocals all at the same time on two mics, and it came out very well. So I been wanting to do that on drums for some time.
It wasn't just about the notes, Page later reflected. It was about the space between them. The silence was just as important as the sound. Enter Glyn Johns. By this point in his career, Glyn was a producer of considerable renown, having worked with the likes of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and The Who. His reputation as a master of sonic clarity was well-deserved, but his approach was rooted in a more traditional ethos. Where Page saw the studio as a playground, Glynn saw it as a workshop, a place where precision and discipline reigned supreme. So when he walked into the studio and heard the early mix of When the Levee Breaks, his reaction was, shall we say, less than enthusiastic. Page recalled the moment with a mix of amusement and exasperation. We were really excited and told him, "You've got to listen to this." Glynn listened and just said, "You'll never be able to cut it. It will never work." And he walked out. It was a dismissal that could have deflated a lesser band, but for Led Zeppelin it was little more than fuel for the fire. If anything, Glynn's skepticism only reinforced their determination to prove him wrong. And prove him wrong they did. The final version of When the Levee Breaks is a masterclass in production, a track that sounds as though it's been hewn from granite. Bonham's drums, drenched in reverb, are the heartbeat of the song, relentless and foreboding.
And I got a couple of M160s, which are very directional bio mics, double ribbon. I put those about halfway up the first set of stairs and compressed the crap out of them. And we also had a thing called a Binson Echo, which is tough to find now, but it's a delay device. You can make the sound fairly easily with anything. And put that in. And it was the first time I'd really heard Bonzo's drums sound like they did when you stood next to them. And it was the first time he didn't complain either. Because when I got that sound, that was my first reaction. Jesus, he's actually going to be happy at last. So that's how we did that. But good luck in getting that sound again, because you really do need Bonzo.
Robert Plant's vocals, equal parts anguish and defiance, cut through the mix like a knife. Page's guitar work is both subtle and seismic, weaving in and out of John Paul Jones's pulsating bass line. It's a song that doesn't just demand attention, it commands it. But the significance of When the Levee Breaks goes beyond its sonic achievements. In many ways, the track is a microcosm of Led Zeppelin's ethos, a willingness to take risks, to defy expectations, and to push the limits of what rock music could be. For Page, the studio was not just a place to record songs, it was a laboratory, a space to experiment with sound and texture. And while that approach may have ruffled feathers, Glyn Johns being a prime example, it was also what set Led Zeppelin apart from their peers. This wasn't the first time Page's vision had clashed with more conventional sensibilities. From the very beginning, Led Zeppelin had been a band that thrived on defying expectations. Their debut album, recorded in just 36 hours, was dismissed by critics as derivative, accused of being too loud, too brash. And yet, with each release, they silenced their detractors, proving that their approach, however unorthodox, was undeniably effective. Even within the band, there was a sense of pushing each other to new heights. Bonham's drumming, for instance, wasn't just a showcase of technical skill, it was a testament to his ability to elevate a song, to make it feel larger than life. Jones's bass lines and keyboard arrangements added depth and complexity, while Plant's vocals brought a raw emotional edge. At the center of it all was Page, orchestrating the chaos, pulling the threads together into something cohesive and extraordinary. In hindsight, Glyn Johns' criticism of When the Levee Breaks seems almost laughable. The track has not only endured, but has become one of the most iconic songs in Led Zeppelin's catalogue. Its influence felt across genres and generations. From hip-hop producers sampling Bonham's drum beat to modern rock bands citing it as an inspiration, the song's legacy is undeniable. And yet, there's something endearingly human about Glyn's reaction. It's a reminder that even the most seasoned professionals can sometimes fail to see the bigger picture, to recognize greatness in its raw, unpolished form. For Page, the incident with Glyn was just another chapter in a career defined by audacity and innovation. "You have to trust your instincts," he once said. "If you believe in something, you have to fight for it." It's a sentiment that could apply not just to When the Levee Breaks, but to Led Zeppelin as a whole.
Basically what he did was say that I'll take care of the business and all outside distractions, and I'll keep them away from you. And you just get on with the music. And he said, you do it your way, I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm not going to tell you should do this or do that, or you're musicians, you do the music. I manage, that's what I do, and that's what he did. He just cleared this big space around us. I was talking to Ahmet Ertegun years later, who said we weren't even allowed to, we were afraid to come near you in case Peter got angry with us, you know. And they weren't at the recordings, you know, studios. They weren't allowed to hear the music until it was absolutely finished. I mean, it was a unique state of affairs. It was very artistically, it was the best you could possibly have.
They were a band that refused to compromise, that pursued their vision with a single-minded determination that bordered on the obsessive, and in doing so, they created something that has stood the test of time. As the final notes of "When the Levee Breaks" fade into the ether, it's hard not to imagine Page, ever the perfectionist, sitting back and allowing himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He may not have won Glyn Johns over in that moment, but he didn't need to. The music speaks for itself, a thunderous testament to the power of vision and persistence, and if Glyn ever does listen back, one can only hope he smiles and admits, however grudgingly, that he was indeed wrong.